Good afternoon, and welcome to the audio recording of Beyond the Valley. Beyond the Valley, Albert and Ada lived in a small village in a valley at the foot of three great towering mountains. The valley was full of fertile land, perfect for growing crops. Dark evergreen forests crept their way up to the craggy mountain peaks. Rain or shine, the valley was beautiful. A big river flowed down from the western mountain and cut across the land to the south. The only way out of the valley was to cross that big, fast-moving river of icy mountain water. It didn't matter much that the river was so big and dangerous because nobody from Albert and Ada's village ever left, and nobody new ever came to visit. In fact, Albert and Ada were 12 years old, and they never met an outsider before. Albert and Ada lived in a small but comfortable cabin with their mama and papa. Mama was the leader of the village council, and Papa was a teacher. Albert and Ada would frequently ask, "Papa, tell us about the world outside the valley." Papa would shake his head. "Oh, children," he would say, "the world outside the valley is not so different. The world is mostly wilderness like we have here. People in the outside world live in their own villages just like we do. They are just like us." So they'd go ask Mama, "Mama, why can't we leave the village? Why aren't we allowed?" "Children, you already know. The wilderness is dangerous to travel through." Enough questions. Albert and Ada had a long list of chores to complete each day. After school, they had to weed the garden, pick and chop vegetables for dinner, sweep the floors in the house, and tidy their bedrooms. One day, while doing their chores, they started talking about the rules. "Albert, I think it's very unfair that we're not allowed to explore outside the valley. I just know there must be so much to discover out there. I want to see and meet different kinds of people." As Ada talked, she used her wand to cast a quick weeding spell. With a flick of her wrist, she made all the dandelion weeds fly out of the ground. She spun them around in the air and then directed them to a nearby bucket. "Ada, I'm sure the rule is there for a reason," Albert replied. "I think Mama and Papa and the other adults are just trying to keep us safe." Albert was using his wand to pluck tomatoes off the biggest tomato plant. He sent the tomatoes flying across the garden and through the kitchen window, where they landed on the cutting board, ready for Mama to cook with. "Well," Ada said, "I think we should leave the valley anyway. I think we should leave early tomorrow morning. We can cross the river and find out what the world is all about." "I don't know, Ada. Mama and Papa will be so upset and worried. Plus, we have that big test tomorrow. Mr. Connor wanted us to be able to demonstrate 5 new spells, including a spell for transforming physical items. Those are so difficult. I really need to practice tonight." "Albert, the big spells test is another reason to leave. Come on." Albert sighed and nodded his head in consent. The next morning, instead of packing their school bags with school books and potions, they packed clothing, a practical spell book, their extra wands, and a bit of food. They kissed their parents goodbye, hoping they wouldn't notice anything unusual. Then, instead of walking to the schoolhouse, they took a different path south towards the river. When they reached the raging river waters, they paused nervously. "It's okay, I have an idea," said Albert. "Why don't we—" "Expressio!" Ada interrupted, flicking her wrist at Albert. The force of the spell launched him up into the air and across the river. He landed rather roughly on the other side. When he had caught his breath, Albert used the same spell to toss Ada across the river, too. Albert sighed, knowing his idea would have been much safer. "Wow, that was fun!" she laughed. Then they began their journey into the unknown. The siblings walked for 3 full days through the wilderness forest without seeing any signs of human life. They walked all day and slept on the mossy ground at night. Albert used a growing spell to create large leaves to use as blankets. Then, in the late afternoon on the 4th day, they emerged from the forest. In front of them was a most shocking sight. Huge buildings rose up from the ground. Unlike the cabins in the village, these buildings were incredibly tall and shiny and came in all shapes and sizes. There were also such bright lights. It was dazzling. Hundreds and hundreds of sharply dressed people walked up and down the sidewalks. There were also rolling machines with people inside zipping down the streets. As Ada and Albert walked through this huge human settlement, they noticed that people looked at them very suspiciously. "Let's stop here for food," said Ada, pointing to a coffee shop. At least this was familiar. Everyone back in the village loved coffee. They went inside and tried to make a purchase, but when the clerk saw the money they held out, her eyes widened and she shook her head. Confused, Albert and Ada sat down. There was a big flat screen on the wall with moving pictures and sound. The siblings looked at it in wonder. There was a lady talking out of the screen, and her words were terrifying. "Another 50 illegal wizard rebels have been arrested in our nation's capital. The government has released the following message. All wizard rebels will be found and arrested. The nation will not tolerate any magical individuals within our borders. Wizards with magical abilities are dangerous criminals and must be locked away." Just then, a man in dark sunglasses approached their table and sat down. "Children, I saw the money you tried to use at the counter. You are clearly wizards from our rebel village. You are not safe here. The best thing is for you to return to your village, but if you want to join us and fight back against the nation's unfair laws against magic, you can find the resistance here." He handed Ada a small card with an address printed on it. "If you don't use it, destroy it," he said, and with that, he was gone. Albert and Ada ran out of the coffee shop and into a small alley. They sat down behind a dumpster to be out of sight and discussed everything they just learned. Obviously, their parents had lied to them. The rest of the world wasn't just like the village, and the rest of the world wasn't magical like them. Instead, the people in the village were in hiding from a government that wanted to lock them away. After hours of discussion, Albert said, "Our mother and father were right to lie to us and keep us hidden. This world will never accept us. We must return to the village. It's the only way to be safe." Ada responded, "Brother, the world will never change if we always retreat or run away. We might feel safer in the valley, but it's a false safety. We will still be living on a planet full of people who don't understand us. The only way to truly be free is to take a risk and fight for our right to exist." Ada reached into her pocket and pulled out the card the strange man had given her. "I'm going to find this address," she said. "I'm going to find the resistance. I'll live with them and work with them. Maybe this is a crazy risk, but I can't go back now that I know the truth." "I understand," said Albert. "I will return to the village and our family, and I will think of you every single day. I will pray that you return to the village someday with news of our freedom." Ada and Albert gave each other a quick hug and wiped tears from their eyes. As Ada dashed off down the dark city street, Albert risked taking out his wand. He quickly waved it towards Ada and cast a temporary invisibility spell that he hoped would last until she arrived at the Resistance headquarters. Albert turned and began the long walk back to the valley. Over the course of the next 3 days, he thought about the choices they each had made. Albert and Ada were different and had chosen different paths to take. Who had decided correctly? Albert was not sure. Only time would tell. Question number 1. When Ada and Albert watched the lady talking on the screen, why were her words terrifying to them? Because they'd never seen a TV before and it scared them? Because they were far away from home and overwhelmed? Because they were afraid of wizard rebels in the city? Because she said that wizard rebels were being arrested and they were wizard rebels. Based on clues in the text, what is the definition of the word fertile? Located in a valley, full of grass, capable of producing a lot of crops, or located at the bottom of 3 mountains. Which of the following was the first event in the story that gave you a clue Ada and Albert were wizards? Albert was using his wand to pluck tomatoes off the biggest tomato plant. The force of the spell launched him up into the air and across the river. As Ada talked, she used her wand to cast a quick weeding spell. It is not the last answer. 4. Based on evidence from the text, Why do you think Ada and Albert's parents did not tell them the truth about life outside of the village? They wanted to protect them from other wizards. They didn't know about life outside the village. They thought life outside the village was boring. They did not agree with the resistance movement. Number 5, based on the story, it's left very open-ended. Write an ending to the story. So it leaves the ending with the boy, Albert, going home to the village, and Ada going to fight the resistance. So I suggest that you choose one of them. Either Ada going off to fight the resistance or Albert going home and finish their story.